I am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interview John Rizzo. He is the managing partner of RDG Partners. He was born in Niagara Falls, New York, and received his bachelor's degree, magna cum laude, in accounting from the State University of New York in 1995. John is an entrepreneur, and his expertise includes providing financial consulting to a wide variety of commercial businesses. He specializes in M&A consulting and has worked on hundreds of transactions during his career. He is focused on helping his clients build wealth and was very active with the recent COVID stimulus programs. He also assisted over 50 companies in obtaining more than $5 million in SBA disaster loan funding following the 9/11 attacks. He was certified in 1998 and has been a member of the Entrepreneurs Organization for 12 years. He is also a member of the AICPA and the New York Society of CPAs. He has a wife, Anne-Marie, for 18 years and has 4 children ranging from 9 to 17 years old. John has been successful through hard work, dedication, and treating his clients' businesses as if they were his own. During this interview, we talk about the influence of his upbringing in athletics and how he learned what hard work was and dedication in order to achieve, and also the influence his mom had on him in calming him in those most stressful moments that he draws upon today in his success as a managing partner of his firm. I hope that you enjoy this interview. Like, share it, and as well to help the people around you that might be looking for stories that John shares during this interview. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where today my guest is John Rizzo. And John, would you like to just get started and give us a little background on yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Thanks, Amy. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it. So, my background, I'm a CPA. I started our accounting firm here in 2005 after working for another firm for 9 years, and decided to take the leap and start my own business, and very entrepreneurial. So that was now 18 years ago now today. Since that time, we started with 2 individuals, my original partner, Brian, who's still with me today, DeJaco, and we've grown the firm over that 17 years to about 70 people from just 2 of us. So it's been a fun, exciting, stressful, rewardful, all the words you could think of experience for us over that time. But as we sit today, I'd call us a full service boutique accounting and business consulting firm. We offer all the accounting services and tax services, but in addition to that, we offer payroll, wealth management, and we broker health insurance. So we call that employee retention solutions. So we consider ourselves a financial center, I guess is the best way to describe where our firm has gone from day one till now.
Awesome. So glad that you could join me today. And to start off the conversation, just want to get a little background on yourself, where you grew up, what town, and what your parents did for a living, if you have siblings. And we'll start there.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I grew up, I had a great upbringing, a very strong family foundation. I grew up in Niagara Falls, New York. So at one point it was the 8th wonder of the world, I think.
Oh, wow.
I think it's fallen off the list for some reason. But I grew up in Niagara Falls. My mom and dad, I basically was my mom, my dad, myself, and my brother and sister.
Okay.
So 5 of us. My dad was a school teacher, a coach. He's very involved in athletics and in the school system, the education system. He's go figure, he's a math teacher. So that's how I found a love for accounting. My mom was kind of the rock of our family. She took care of she was more a stay at home, took care of the household, was a perfectionist with that, still is today. She really took care of us from that perspective. She was kind of the shoulder to cry on when you needed one, the softer one. My dad was more the disciplinarian, and he really drove that discipline into us. So it was a good balance to have them together. We grew up in a small house in Niagara Falls and pretty humble environment. And there's a lot of hard knocks involved there. But I learned a lot from, where I grew up.
Yeah. So, what did your father coach? What type of team?
So he coached baseball and football. He had every season covered. So he coached baseball and football. So baseball in the spring, football in the fall, and he was a wrestling official in the winter. So
Oh, wow.
he had all 3 seasons covered. So he was at practice a lot. I was kind of, I grew up on the playing fields with him, as a 5-year-old ball boy, all the way up to a player myself, with him as my coach, both baseball and football.
Okay.
And then I went on to college athletics in that. So we're very, big sports, household.
Yeah. So how was that to have your father as a coach?
It was good and bad,
Yeah.
exposure. It was, it was good to be around him and learn from him and see how passionate and dedicated he was,
Hmm.
with how he handled everything. Really, he's, just disciplined. If there's one word to describe him, it's discipline. And
Yeah.
he displayed it in everything that he did.
Yeah.
On the flip side, outsiders would sometimes think I was receiving special treatment because my dad was my coach, and that was far from the truth. I mean, I had to work harder probably than anybody to earn a spot on the
Right.
team and that sort of thing. So it wasn't always rosy, because you did have these outside influences, and for me, it affects me what people think,
Right.
and there were different thoughts probably out there about my situation there with being around my father so much, like in the classroom, he was my teacher even. So there, you had the
Wow.
same kind of thoughts there. So
So how did you deal with that? Like with people making comments or that outside perception? Because that's hard sometimes
it was, I
to
mean,
prove who you
as
are.
a teenage, yeah, as a teenager, was much harder to deal with than as an adult. Over time, you learn. But I think in the locker room, I earned the respect of all the other players just from hard work. So how I responded to it was, I'm just going to work as hard as I can and prove. I needed to prove to somebody, because if everyone thought that I didn't have to prove myself to my father, which wasn't the truth, but let's just assume it is, then I felt like I had to prove myself to everybody else. And the way I accomplished that was through, I would say, hard work.
Hmm.
First one there, last one to leave. That was kind of my mentality.
Yeah. And then how did you know that you achieved that?
It's hard to know, but statistics is one way to know.
Yeah.
Kind of more objective things, like, yeah, here's my batting average, here are the number of touchdowns I've scored. So other accolades I received, outside of our team, you
Hmm.
know within the city and so forth. Those are one ways to find out. And then just, friendships, right? Conversations with your friends that were on the team about, how we're doing and how we're all performing. And, I over time found that the other players were starting to look up to me as a captain,
Hmm.
and they respected that. So it was a balance of some subjective things, some objective things, conversations, accolades, a combination of it all.
Yeah. So seeking out feedback to kind of without them being too obvious about it.
Right. And
Yeah.
I never really asked for feedback.
Hmm.
I'm still not great at that. I provide a lot of feedback in business for sure. But you just kind of know, like, my mentality has always been prove yourself, and then, everything else will fall into line.
Yeah. And then did you ever talk to your mom about your internal struggles with this?
all the time. Yeah, she was the safe place to talk about things.
Yeah.
My dad's very stoic, very, he's more of an action person versus a words person,
Yeah.
his actions speak louder than words, and that definitely defines my father. My mom was the opposite. She was, the very comforting person to go to when you needed to talk, you needed a hug, anything like that. You felt very comfortable in her space,
Yeah.
and she did bring a lot of balance there for me.
So did she give you any advice that you remember during that time?
Um, yeah, most of her advice was that everything was okay.
Hmm.
Everything's fine. Whatever you're stressing about or worried about, I've been known to be a worrier, and she was the one that kind of took the worry away from me, when I needed it.
Hmm.
So it was good to have, that's probably the biggest lesson that I learned from her is things could be a lot worse.
Yeah. Um, yeah, because it's always good to know, well, whether you have that in your life where you know that you need that offset in your gaps, when you know that that is an area for you, or where you can at least summon that as an example, in your life when you feel yourself doing those things or worrying about what people think and that sort of thing.
Yeah, when you stack on all these responsibilities of today, with all that's going on in businesses and employees and things like that, I do find myself asking the question to myself, what's the worst that could happen? When you start to stress about something, I ask that question, what's the worst that could happen? And
Hmm.
usually the answer is nothing major,
Right.
usually most of the time. So
Right.
then that calms you down, said, okay, because we all get stressed about different things. And, your level of, your definition of something stressful could be very different than mine.
Right.
So that's what I would, I find myself asking that question quite a bit.
So yeah, and so that those are like great lessons to bring into your life and remember when you've got more responsibilities, like being a managing partner and all your client issues and staff issues. So as part of growing up, where did you get involved with business? Because you really doesn't sound like you had that in your background. Is there someone that you modeled yourself after, or you saw, or how did you end up in this field?
Well, this is a funny story. So when I was a kid, so this is back when, in every state, most states, you didn't have to pump gas. So New York, where we are, someone pumped gas for you. It was full
Yeah.
service everywhere you went. And there really weren't credit cards, so when I'm a kid and my parents would, drive to the gas station, there'd be someone that would come out and they'd pump your gas and you'd pay them cash. And when they make change for you, they'd always pull out this big wad of cash. you know, so and they'd go through the tens and the 20s and the fives and the ones and get you your change back. Needs to be exact change, and we're always dealing cash. My assumption as a kid was that that was all their money. That whatever. So this big wad of money, I'm like, God, I want to work at a gas station.
Isn't that funny?
So that was kind of step one of thinking about owning a business. My parents didn't come from that, but my uncles did. So my uncles, I have four uncles on my mom's side. They almost all were in business.
Okay.
So I think that's where I get it from, where my brother and sister aren't. So that was the indication of, okay, what's the value of a dollar and what is the process of earning it and kind of controlling your own destiny if you're going to be in business for yourself. Now, I
Mhm.
was good at math, but I didn't want to be a teacher, and accounting business was the next closest thing for me to utilize those skills.
So when did you realize that, in high school or college?
I realized it in college. So when I went away to school, accounting wasn't offered as a major, it was offered as an elective. I took the class. The first project was a software project for a grocery store, kind of handling the finances of a grocery store.
That's actually interesting. Usually you don't get interesting things in accounting 101.
Exactly. So that, luckily, I took that class. And as you got through the software, accounting is very black and white, as you know, like you're the right or you're wrong most of the
Right.
time. So this software wouldn't let you continue on to the next module until you got everything right. So that's what I loved about it. Like it all balanced, it all was right. And by the end, I completed this. So I went on to actually do that software program for about 10 of the students in the class because they weren't really accounting minds. I loved it. So after going through that course and realizing I couldn't obtain an accounting degree from that school, I decided to change schools just for accounting.
Wow. And so what school did you end up going to?
So I started at Allegheny College in Pennsylvania. I mainly went there for athletics. I played on the baseball and football team. They had won the Division III football national title the year before I got there. So they had all sorts of attention recruits in that year. And I got caught up probably more in the sports athletics part of it than the education future.
Yeah.
And so that's why I chose that school originally. And then at least I was quick to realize after 2 years that accounting was more my passion. So I transferred to a state school, Fredonia in New York, and I continued to play sports there. I played baseball. They didn't have a football team, but I joined the accounting department there. Once I knew this is what I really wanted to do with my career.
And so what did your parents think of that?
They were very supportive.
Mm-hmm.
It was closer to home, number one. Number two, my sister actually, so she's only a grade younger than me. So she was already at that school. So it was exciting to be at a same school with her.
Oh, okay.
Maybe not as exciting for her because I was always kind of looking over her shoulder, being the big brother. But I think they were happy that I was closer to home, that I was settling in on a major, and I was with my sister.
Oh, okay. So you have a close relationship with your sister.
Yeah. So I'm the only of the three of us, I'm the only one that kind of moved away. So my brother's first house when he got married was about 4 doors down from my parents. And my sister was literally 2 blocks away.
Okay.
And that's how tight our family was.
Uh-huh.
Our relationships, were much closer when I was there and around.
Yeah.
I moved to Rochester, New York, out of Niagara Falls, in 1996. So I've been here. I've been here 26 years.
Right.
So it is hard to maintain those relationships when you're not around each other as much.
Mm-hmm.
So our relationship isn't what it was back then.
Yeah.
We all would admit that. But we still have that foundation together that will never go away. We actually 3 of us were texting this morning about different holiday gifts and things for our parents. So
that's nice. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like that foundation of growing up together, and there's nobody else that understands things like the 3 of you,
right.
together.
I shared a room with my brother for a lot of years. There's situations and things that happen over the years that only the 3 of us, know about, and can, around the Thanksgiving table can bring up some stories and laugh about it.
Yeah, which is nice. That could go either way, right? Sharing your room together.
In our family, it goes well. We have pretty good sense of humor.
That's great.
We can take it.
So when you graduated, then that's when you started with the first accounting firm?
Yeah. So I graduated. It's a funny story. So I sent my resume probably to 25 or 30 accounting firms. The one thing I didn't do was sign my cover letter. So there's a lesson to be learned. I was, moving too fast, trying to do 10 things at once. And luckily, the one firm that I sent it to in Rochester, a good friend of mine was already working there. So I sent it to him to actually deliver it to their HR department or whoever was reviewing resumes there. And he was able to sign my name to the cover letter
Oh
when he
my gosh.
received it. And that firm was the only firm that called me back.
Isn't that crazy? Because like how unimportant that would be today.
Yes. Yeah. Today things are email. There aren't cover letters. I receive
No.
emails, weekly basis, and I can't remember the last time I saw a cover letter with the
Yeah.
email.
I had
So he saved me.
well, it just reminded me, I had another podcast with Boyd Search from the Georgia Society, and he hadn't put his phone number on the resume and didn't understand why no one was calling him back.
Yeah,
Before
exactly.
email and everything.
Yep. Yeah. So I got saved by a friend at that firm that signed my
That's
name,
awesome.
and that's where I started. I ended up there for 9 years.
And so what was your, did you do audit or tax, or what were you doing
I
there?
started in audit. So of course, when you go into accounting, you think it's all numbers,
Right.
and your family thinks you're a tax genius.
Yeah, I know,
But
exactly.
the truth is, I couldn't have done anybody's taxes for
No.
several years.
Uh-huh.
When I joined that firm. So I started in audit, and I started to learn that sales is a big part of accounting. Like,
Mhm.
you need clients in order to have work to do.
Mhm.
And you have to bill those clients, and you have to collect money from those clients so that you can pay all the bills. And that felt more like where I wanted to be than, in a room ticking and tying out audit work papers with very little people interaction. I
Mhm.
liked kind of going around from client to client, versus being in industry just at one company. So I
Yeah.
did enjoy meeting different people, learning about different industries. I wouldn't trade starting in audit. I learned a lot. But after so many years, I got to the point where it just didn't feel like that's where I belonged, was in audit.
Yeah. And I think that whole point about sales and business development is not talked about enough, because I think that's such a big part of the job of relationship building. You might not think of it as sales, but it's deepening the relationship. So anything that happens with that client, they're coming to you, or making new relationships and networking, and
Yep.
it's not taught enough. It's not talked about, from when you start, things that you can already be looking out for upsells and things like that. They're going to help you in your career.
Absolutely. You're right. It's not taught. It's taught more now than ever. Soft skills we teach soft skills just as much as we teach technical skills here.
Right.
Now, for me, I just learned it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Got to meet people, and didn't going into accounting. This wasn't even on my radar that
Yeah.
this was even part of the business. I was probably too naive to think, like, where do the clients even come from?
Right.
And it was, now the marketing is much more aggressive than it was back then. Like, back then, it was kind of an unwritten rule to try to steal a client from another firm. Like,
Right.
never went over well. Accountants, like, don't play nice together.
Yeah.
We're not. Even with the pocket protectors, we don't. Now it's so different. Like, is it most firms have a marketing department, and do offer various services. It wasn't like that when I started.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I started in audit as well. And
Did you?
I think audit was such a good, well, for someone who is an entrepreneur, a business person, it's a good foundation for all of that into the future. But
Yeah,
yeah.
it comes down to, for me, it was value. Like, some companies just wanted their audit as a stamp of approval so
Yes.
that the bank, their bank requirements satisfied, or whatever reason they needed their audited statements for. What I learned is that tax, with, what you pay in taxes was much more important to a client than their audit.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Not every client,
Yeah.
but, and we're in the middle of that now. It's, it's tax planning season. We're letting people know, you know, what we think they're going to owe for this year.
Right.
And handling that reaction is a skill on its own.
For sure. Yeah. And it's keeping that contact with the client all year too. So you can be watching for that and building that relationship, the things that they can do,
Absolutely.
So yeah. So so what made you want to have your own practice? What created that desire?
I think I kind of knew. It's funny, when in my interview with that firm, they asked me, the popular interview question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And my answer was, in your chair. That was the answer I gave the partner that interviewed me. He goes, oh, wait a minute. I'm still pretty young. And I said,
Yeah.
well, I want to be an owner. I kind of knew walking in, and from that experience I mentioned, as a young kid, I kind of knew pretty early on that I wanted to be a partner in a firm. I didn't necessarily know day one I wanted my own firm.
Hmm.
I learned that later, but I knew I wanted to be an owner. I knew right away.
Hmm. And so what shifted that of being a partner versus starting your own?
I think that firm grew very fast.
Hmm.
It's a great firm. They did really well. And I would have been probably the 33rd partner.
Mm.
When I started there were 5 partners, and that felt nice and quaint. And, if I could be one of the first 10 partners of this firm would be phenomenal. But through acquisition and promotions and so forth, by the time I got close to the top after 9, and this doesn't happen overnight, as after 9 years, I got to the top. I realized I didn't feel like I could make enough of an impact fast enough as the 33rd partner.
Yeah.
So that's when I started thinking, okay, here are my options. I either move forward with this and stay part of this team of this many partners, or I start my own.
Or you
And
start pumping gas.
yeah, exactly. Start pumping my own gas, having that wad of cash in my own pocket. But basically, it also came down to flexibility
Hmm.
of owning other businesses around the accounting firm.
Hmm.
And I didn't feel like I would have enough flexibility to do that as one of 33 partners in a firm.
Right. So what was your process of starting your practice? Were you scared? Did you have any fear around it?
Yeah, I'm very competitive.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like, I need to get out of my comfort zone
Hmm.
to feel like, for things to feel real.
Right.
So that put me there. It put
Hmm.
me way out of it. And I had my partner, Brian, and he had more concerns because I was more the revenue generator. And, I had a list of clients that I thought, would join us. And our handshake was, if I bring in the work, are you good doing the work day one?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
We both agreed to that, and we made our lists. And, there was timing involved, like, before year end, and we had vacation pay coming to us and so forth. So we knew we were pretty comfortable we can get through our first quarter, without a problem. Then it
Hmm.
was just a question of how many clients would come over and how many wouldn't. And surprisingly, more than we expected came over. So that was validation that, they liked us, they
Hmm.
wanted us to be their accountant. So we bought 2 laptops from Circuit City. So we always laughed that our business outlasted Circuit City because they filed for bankruptcy. But it is where on a Circuit City credit card, we bought our first 2 laptops. And we remember that it was an ugly teal laptop. And we basically hooked up our laptops and started in my house, my home office.
That's awesome. At least, every tech founder says they start in the kitchen. So at least you're saying you started in the office.
Well, you could argue it was the spare bedroom, probably.
Okay.
It's like, depending on how
I
you
just
want
think
to
it's
use the
funny.
space. Yeah.
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 So garage or office is the two.
Yeah.
Um, so uh so I think one of the things you said is important. I think for anyone starting a business or working with people, that you understand your lane. And I think the one thing you said about like Brian doing the work and you bringing in the business, because I think a lot of times those understandings don't, they're not discussed before a business gets started. There's no job description. And then if you're kind of the rainmaker and he's not, then there's like bad blood already, right in the beginning. So how did you know to kind of do that with him?
Well, it starts with a friendship for me.
Yeah.
Like there were others that left
How did
that
you,
firm. I'm
oh,
sorry.
he was from that firm with you?
Yeah, he was at that firm. So we met at that firm. We didn't know each other before that firm, but we got to know each other and we started to have these conversations and we had a lot of the same values.
Mm-hmm.
And we became friends. So we were friends first.
Right.
Others had left that firm and honestly asked me to join them to start their own firm, but I didn't feel the culture bond, the friendship. It
Right.
just wasn't right for me. And that's our firm today is all about culture. So
Yeah.
it started with a friendship between him and I. And then yes, you're right. We had to change and adjust several times from what you said. It's not always fair that one person brings in the work and probably gets more of the credit while
Right.
the other person is just doing the work.
Right.
We started to combine some of that. It was still more shifted towards him, the doing of the work. But ironically, today he is basically running our business development team and doing less of the work.
Yes.
So and I'm doing more administrative work of running the firm, and I'm doing less of say the selling. But in accounting, you have to do a little bit of everything. So
Right.
even if you're the managing partner, you're still bringing in work and you're still billable. You're still doing work.
Yeah.
But we changed our arrangement multiple times from day one.
And so how do you do that? Do you have like a set time you kind of reset together, and I know you have more than him now as partners, but
Yeah,
so how
today,
do you kind of recalibrate to make sure everybody's doing what they want to be doing and what they're best at doing?
yeah. So if you had asked me that 4 or 5 years ago, I wouldn't have a great answer.
Right.
4 or 5 years later, this is as of today. We're doing a lot in that area. And Corey Raji, our chief operating officer, is one of the main reasons we are. I mean, we knew enough that we needed someone from the outside to help us with that. And then we hired Corey after 17 years at a publicly traded company. So she brought a lot of skills and human resource skills that we never really had. But our partner group meets at least twice a month and we cover all these things. And we've had a lot of hard conversations, role changes, significant things we've done in the last several years, taking people in a role where they thought they were best and put them in a role that the group thought they were best. And it was a little uncomfortable in the beginning. It's a change, right? But over time, I think everyone has come to the conclusion that they're in the right spot. And today we have in the accounting firm, we have 7 partners.
And so as a managing partner, you talked about from growing up that you worried what people thought of you, or if they thought you deserved the spot that you were in, and so forth. So have you felt that way as a leader at any time? And if so, what have you done to overcome that?
Yeah, I do. I felt that a lot as a leader because I kind of just move. And some of the partners tell you, Rizzo, slow down a little bit. Like we're trying to catch up with you. Like, let's take this, we need to maybe take a little more time on this. It's the same principles from when I was young. I just work hard and I think I've earned respect from hard work. People see me here, they might see me here early, they might see me leave here late, they might see me messaging them, at certain times, supporting them at certain times, which isn't always good for balance, right? It's, you know,
No.
that's where it becomes a problem.
Mhm.
But over time, you gain the confidence, you know, that the team is behind you. You
Mhm.
know, the financial results can tell you some of it, but not all of that. So, but it's the same principles that I've had in me my whole life that I continue to use today.
And can you think of a time where you've had to kind of flip into what your mom would say and say, how bad could it be? What is the worst that could happen?
Probably yesterday. I mean, it still happens all the time. You know, yeah, you do think of that. I think it comes down to, as you have more experience, confidence.
Hmm.
So for me, it's, you know, we've been here now for almost 18 years. So we're doing something right, right? We got past the 7 year, whatever they say the business hurdles are to survive. You
Right.
know, we've been through different crises and different things that have happened, and we've grown by double digits every year since we started. So I don't reflect enough, but when I do choose to reflect, it's very positive. So what I
Hmm.
do is I kind of reflect on, okay, we're making another decision. It's a big decision, but look at all the other big decisions we made and how they turned out.
When you said you've had crises over time, how have you moved through them? And, because I think being a business owner myself, a lot of times, some hard things hit that you can't predict. And, everybody else is like doom and gloom and putting their, like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And then as the leader, you kind of have to shoot into action.
Yeah.
So, and it can be lonely because you can't, it's really got to be you. So,
Yeah.
how have you helped the firm get through those periods of time?
So I learned 9/11 was probably the first time that I said, okay, this is an opportunity to help businesses that are in need. And by the way, my wife, Anne Marie, she was actually in the second tower
Oh, wow.
on 9/11. So it had even more of a special meaning to me because of her situation
Hmm.
and how she survived that. You know,
Wow.
we're talking life or death survival versus, you know, making sure a client's happy survival, you know. So,
I mean, we can't pass
but
over
they
that. How
offer,
did she survive?
well, I don't want to speak for her, but essentially she worked for a firm that had their training in that building. And when the first tower was hit, the second tower that she was in started to evacuate.
Mm,
And then they told everyone in the first tower and the second tower that the second tower was secure. There was no need to evacuate. Luckily, she didn't listen to that. And she continued down a stairwell with a group of people.
wow.
And as she was, going down the stairwell, the second tower actually got hit. And luckily, she exited away from the first tower. She was on that side of the building and was able to get out.
Wow.
But there was a time period for me that, you know, I was at my old firm and I was in, um, everybody had heard of what happened and everyone's watching in the conference room on TV, and her office had called me and said, we heard from her at 9 something in the morning, but we haven't heard from her since. And it was between 9 and about 11:30, by the time I heard from her again. So there's
Wow.
a 2+ hour window, there that, was obviously very stressful. And then I ended up driving down there to pick her up
Yeah.
the next day. And it's just something that she went through that'll be with her for the rest of her life. And, you know,
Well, I was just, and we'll get back to your story, but it just reminded me, and I think it is a really good lesson, um, of, what it takes to be a leader and think like a leader. And I had heard this other speaker talk about they were in a hotel where the fire alarm went off and they were in the top floor. And, the message was in another language, they were in another country, but they could tell it was like, get out,
Yeah.
get your stuff, get out. And they went out in the hallway and everybody's kind of looking around like, should we go? Should we not go? Everyone's looking to each other. And she's like, no, we go, like we get out of this building, and that's kind of a leadership lesson at the same time of where, you don't get stuck, trying to look around what everybody else is doing, that you listen to that intuition and you move forward. And I think as an entrepreneur, you have to pull that strength. A lot of the times it's not as extreme as that, but to fight, the messages of stay in the building, and you're like,
Yep.
heck no, get it,
Yeah.
who
And
cares? What, if I get out and nobody else leaves, who cares? Like the building doesn't go down, at least I'm still safe,
Yep. And I'm more practical.
Yeah.
So I probably would have been the one to go back up.
Yeah.
My wife is, she's very strong. Right. And I could easily see her as the leader of that group saying, there's no way we're going back up. Let's go.
Yeah.
She's a leader in her own right. She's a strong person. And I could easily see her doing that, in that situation.
Yeah. So you were talking about after that happened.
So sorry. I just had to mention that whenever 9/11 gets mentioned, it's so much more important than anything we've done.
Yeah.
But 9/11 came out and there was a program, low interest loans. They were 4% 30-year loans for business owners that were impacted by 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
So this was, I think, my first entrepreneurial project that I kind of took on myself as a non-partner at the other firm. And we were able to help, hundreds of clients and obtain new clients from it, really obtain those loans. It's more or less, it's an unheard of loan for a business.
Right.
It's like a mortgage for a business that doesn't exist. There's no bank today that would give you that, unless something like COVID happens.
Right.
But 30-year loans, 4%. So that was the first step in saying, okay, in a time of need, let's not kind of sulk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's turn it into a positive and help people.
Yeah.
And of course, it helped us too as a business. So that was the first moment. And, that project went really well. And we helped a lot of people obtain that money.
So did you cultivate that during PPP and everything?
Exactly. So when COVID hit and every business shut down, I remember to this day, and I have an email that I sent the whole staff that we will fight. We will do everything we can. Their programs are coming out. I knew from my prior experience what might happen. I didn't realize it'd be trillions of dollars in stimulus. I mean, 9/11 was a loan that you had to repay. There was no actual stimulus, that you kept.
Mm-hmm.
But we sat in a war room, basically, just our partners. Everyone else we had leave the office, for safety with what was happening. And we launched a resource center and a webinar series within a few days. And we are up and running. And we were the primary source for a lot of businesses on how to get through this financially.
That's awesome. That must feel very gratifying for all of you.
Yeah. And that was just a reaction. That wasn't stressful, because I had the 9/11 experience. It's like, okay, guys, for some of the younger partners that hadn't,
gone through
barely alive back then.
Yeah.
So I had the experience to help us through that. And then the team stepped in, we divided and conquered, and it went really well.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, so many good stories. And I'd like to end it with just a couple rapid fire questions. So you get to pick a category.
Okay.
So it's family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Let's go with family and friends.
I thought you picked a lot of money.
I know. We already talked about that.
Okay. Things or actions I don't have that I want.
More time.
Hmm.
More time with the family has been on my goal sheet for way too long.
Yeah. And we talked about that when I was at your firm event with your wife, I think, too.
Yep. But as an entrepreneur, it's,
Yeah.
the challenge is what you do every day impacts them,
Hmm.
both positively in some ways, and then negatively just by you not being around as much.
Yeah. And so it's really has to be a mental practice. It's a mental exercise to try to get through that.
Yeah.
Things or actions I do have that I want to keep with my family and friends.
Um, I'm very active with my kids in their athletics.
Hmm.
So it's very rare for me to miss a game or anything. Actually, my son laughed at me. My wife signed me up to assistant coach my fourth graders basketball team, and I never played basketball. And after the first practice, my son said, "Dad, I think you're probably going to end up being the head coach by the end of the year." And I'm like, "Yeah, Paul, I think you're probably right." Like I'm not a good number two. Well,
No.
like I'm a good number one, I think. I'm
Yeah.
not the best wingman
Yeah.
when it comes to just, helping out.
Yeah.
I
Well, you
gotta take
gotta
I
know
gotta
your,
take control.
yeah, like you gotta know what you're good at, right? Things or actions that I don't have that I don't want to have with my family and friends.
That I don't have and I don't want. To me, it's, when you have a business and you're successful, you do have material things.
Hmm.
And I can't say that I don't have them, but it's not a want.
Hmm.
So I think I for me, happiness is a want.
Yeah.
To be in an environment that is most of the time happy. We can't always be happy.
Right, 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 right.
To be in that sort of environment is, most important to me.
Hmm.
And I have that. It's the material things that aren't necessary.
Right. And if that starts being the goal, then it starts driving different behaviors or
Exactly. Yeah, you
Mhm.
ask yourself the question, why am I in business? Like,
Yeah.
that's a big question mark. Like, why am I doing this? Why wouldn't I just work for somebody else and
Mhm.
maybe leave all the problems there when I leave the job? It's like you carry it all with you wherever you go. It's
Yeah.
like, do you want to keep why are you carrying this?
Yeah.
And
I do find it interesting because, I'm the same as an entrepreneur that, some people are very driven by money. I just hope, I mean, that the work that I do makes the money, but it's not like the first thing, right? Like you need to make the money to support the work that you want to do is more, kind of where, what you want to put out in the world. But it is interesting that what got you started was a lot of cash, but now at this age, you're like, but what I really want is happiness. Like that's, I need to have a base, that gives me the foundation to create happiness, but
Yeah,
it's like, how much is enough?
exactly. And that's it. And yeah, financial independence has
Mhm.
always been a goal. I think any
Right.
business owner will tell you that.
Yeah.
That allows you to do other things,
Yes.
that give you more balance and maybe make you more happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. So is there anything we haven't talked about or that you want people who are listening to this conversation to take away um, from it?
No, I think it's like, to me, it takes a village. It takes a village both at home and at work. So having my wife and my kids and that foundation, I have four kids, three are in high school and one is in fourth grade. So having that support, and they learn, like kids are smarter than you think.
Right.
They learn over time, like what we do for a living and why it's important.
Yeah.
And same with my wife works, so we have working household and that sort of thing. And then here at the office, we're nothing without the team. We're
Right.
very big. One RDG is our big push this year, that everyone working together. If one spoke is off on the wheel, we're going to have a problem. We're going to end up with a flat.
Right.
And culture, teamwork, I can't emphasize that enough. And then the network, if I could point to one thing outside of how great our people are and those relationships and our clients that made us successful, I would say the network.
Mm-hmm.
The network of bankers, attorneys, neighbors, friends, wherever business comes from, that network of people that now business is just coming in without, it's a lot of it's inbound, it's referral,
Right.
and that wouldn't exist without the network.
Yeah. And that's the goal, is to get more clients like the clients you have.
Exactly.
Like people that you like to work with, right? Like,
Right. And we went through a whole process there, because our big thing there is we're motivated and responsive. We want to work with motivated and responsive people.
mm-hmm.
That's how we've defined kind of the client profile for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know,
Love that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to tell your story. There were so many great lessons in it, and I'm sure everyone's going to enjoy listening.
Thanks, Amy. Appreciate it.
And now for my mindful moments during this interview that I had with John, where there were so many little stories as well as lessons that I think all of us can take away from this. And the first one was really talking about his upbringing, with his father being his coach and also his teacher, and how he really had to start proving himself so that people didn't think things were handed to him starting from an early age. And, many times he thought that people thought that he was getting special treatment. And so he learned early on, by being dedicated and passionate and working hard, that you were able to prove yourself beyond what people's perceptions would be. He also really learned as well with his friends and teammates that as he would, make accomplishments and become a leader on the team, that he was gaining their respect as well. So just really observing how people are treating you, what people are saying, and so forth can really help with understanding that maybe some things can be in your head of what you think people think versus when you actually observe them or ask them, so that you can better respond to it rather than allowing your self-talk to get in the way of your success. And so we also talked about how he started in accounting, and he started in college on athletic scholarships because of his talent in baseball and football. And at the college that he started, there really wasn't an accounting class. It was only an elective. And when he did that elective, he found he enjoyed it so much. And so I think it's really nice when we fall into our career in a way of joy, that it's something that we find we're good at, versus a lot of times we're following in the footsteps of who comes before us. And he told a great story about the fact that when he was younger and his parents would go to get gas at a gas station, the guy that would pump the gas had a big wad of cash in order to give change. And that was something that he saw as a business owner, that you could be successful, and thought that money was going to him. But really realizing what those things are that kind of are our guiding lights, and that actually inspire us to be able to succeed, is always interesting. And to look back and actually see that these things have worked out for us. And so he, started with a firm out of college, and quickly learned that sales and business development was a big part of the job. And we had a discussion about how much of that is not always discussed in especially accounting practices, but I think all businesses, because no matter what level you are in a business or a practice, a lot of times we don't actually have the opportunity to learn about soft skills or learn about business development in our roles, which might be upselling, which might be, where we actually scope engagements to see what are the things that they need that we can offer them without giving them for free, but actually putting them in the right place in the firm or referring them to the right person. Those are already sales skills that we learn very early on. And so making that investment in the soft skills in the relationship is so important, just as important as the technical skills if we want to grow a relationship. And so then we talked about him moving into having his own firm and the importance of starting that firm with someone that shared his values. And I think that is also another thing that gets missed a lot is we don't talk about our values. And when we do, we might write it down for corporate reasons, but we don't remind ourselves of them. We don't live them. We're not evaluating the people that work in our company by those values. And it's very important that they're always front of mind, because that is actually what makes sure to protect the culture and protect the values that you're trying to create in your business. And you have to be very intentional about it. And I know from being out at their firm, they've got their values listed right in the front of the office, and it's really apparent, and it's something that they are living in the way that the office is set up and the kinds of culture and activities that they do in that firm. And so another change that we talked about was, as the firm was growing bigger, that they had to recalibrate what the roles are and having those hard discussions amongst the partners. And I think many times we avoid hard discussions because they're hard and we just don't want to get into them. But if we're going to be successful as a business, it's important that we're having very open discussions and talking about, are we happy? Are we happy in the things that we're doing? How does everyone else evaluate the work that we're doing? And it can be very uncomfortable, but as long as we are being authentic and we're bringing that into the workplace, we can often come out with a better result because we had the conversation, because we had the hard discussion in order to do that. And so, we talked about how important it is to have this entrepreneurial mindset as a leader, and that he was able to still carry on, even when he might be doubting internally whether, people are feeling like he's doing the right things and so forth. He knew, again, going back to growing up, that he was, he working hard helped him to earn respect, and also that the team would gain confidence in who he is as a leader as well. And making sure that when you're in a crisis, that you are showing leadership in those moments to keep everyone going, so that people aren't having fear that everything's going to go down. And we talked about 9/11, which I think was such an important discussion. So definitely listen to that with his wife that was in the second tower and the decisions she made, but also how you make those decisions and look at a crisis and figure out, like, with the skill sets that I have and the things that I can do, how can I make this better? And so we talked about how he did that with 9/11. And we also talked about in COVID, how him and the partners, really got together in a war room and talked about how they can help their clients be able to save their businesses and be an important part of the future of those businesses as well. And so what it took was every partner taking, what their best skill set is and really dividing and conquering to do it. And so really at the end of this, we're just talking about how important a community of support is, whether that be at work or at home, but really understanding that we need to look out for what are those relationships that can help support the initiatives and the success that we want to create, whether that's in business or whether that's in our home life, and be brutally honest about the things that we're good at and the things we are not good at. So we look for those gaps and we look for opportunities for people to step up in the things that we aren't as good at. We don't have to be everything to everyone. I hope you enjoyed this interview as much as I did. I think John shared so many great stories that can be lessons to us all. And I look forward to our next time together. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.